there is a weariness in the air that is being coupled with an activation. I think Black people are just tired. Black people are also just indignant. You know, in the words of David, I will become even more undignified than this.
Take a little break from the crazy, try to recalibrate. Every day seem to be hazy, I see doom. Everybody sick with obsession, it's hard to navigate. Take your baggage out of my space, I need room. Reset. New world order. Reset. New world order.
My sister. My sister.
My brother from another mother.
What's going on?
How you doing?
I am well today. You know, I am well. I'm being well. I'm very excited about today. I'm so grateful that you're joining me right now. You know, this is.
I've been Team You since our Yale days, and so I feel grateful that you invited me to be a part of your of the festival today. I'm always in support of your artistry, your activism, your ministry, your humanity.
Thank you. Bless you for that. Thank you. And I'm also a fan of you since those Yale days. I've looked at you as a big sister. For the folks joining us, this is Stir Crazy. This is the Stir Crazy Festival. My name is JP Reynolds, and I'm being joined right now by a very dynamic woman whom I look up to and who has provided some guidance and even some just personal spiritual journey for me along my own path. This is Neichelle R. Guidry, Reverend Neichelle, PhD Neichelle, Dean of Spelman Sisters Chapel Neichelle, Big Sister Neichelle. So this is the first kind of session conversation for the Stir Crazy Festival. And I wanted to kind of start this foundation for the conversation with spiritual wellness. So I reached out to you, of course. And obviously, you know, when I reached out originally, the only thing that was happening was the pandemic.
Right.
And
the world has gone up in flames since then.
Right. So now we have the pandemic and an uprising. And, you know, I hope this conversation, I know this conversation because I know who you are. I know this conversation will be one that considers spiritual community and spiritual force in terms of where we are, especially in the age of COVID-19 and in the age of this uprising, this new uprising. So, you know, first I kind of, you know, for folks joining again, I do want to address, you know, the changing community of spiritual community, the changing nature of it and what it looks like. You know, obviously right now, rituals and customs are different because folks are not in space with each other. But then we also have this uprising where folks are in space with each other and there's a spiritual force that is taking over.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of things at play here. And there's also the divide of what I would call the prophetic and priestly when it comes to spiritual spaces. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that dynamic and where we are right now in terms of what the Spirit is saying.
Well, Spirit is definitely speaking. And I have to say personally that I feel Spirit like coursing through my body right now because I just left in action and came home to have this conversation with you. Yes. And, you know, I feel like Black people in this country have never had the luxury of being able to choose, well, really to choose anything, right? But being able to choose, like, which fight I'm going to fight at any given time, right? Because at any given time, we're fighting for our lives. At any given time, we're fighting for, you know, the rights, you know, that have been, you know, constitutionally promised to us, but have been denied to us since the dawn of time, right? Since the beginning, right? And so our spirituality, in many senses, has been the thing that has convinced us that we are somebody, that we are God's people, and that we have not only a human right, but we have a divine right, to our humanity, to our safety, to our to peace. And you know, I'm speaking to the specificity of the United States of America. We definitely have that right in this country because we built this country. And our spirituality, I think that you are absolutely spot on, that we have had this chasm in the Black community of this pious sort of Christianity, pious religion that crosses across religious traditions and sort of this very outspoken prophetic religious traditions. But, you know, as I've been thinking about this particular moment, JP, I just think that right now is the reckoning. Right now is the reckoning.
Yeah.
I think even before this latest iteration of the movement, when we saw the footage of Brother Ahmaud Arbery, when we heard the story of Sister Breonna Taylor, and most certainly when that footage was released of George Floyd being asphyxiated by that cop.
Yeah.
With all of that happening at the same time as this COVID-19 Rona pandemic that was already threatening Black communities at disproportionate rates because of all of our pre-existing conditions as a community.
Yeah.
There is a weariness in the air that is being coupled with an activation. I think Black people are just tired. Black people are also just indignant. You know, in the words of David, I will become even more undignified than this.
Yeah.
And so what I'm praying and I'm hoping in this moment is that at least I pray that we will go back, that we will send Kofa to the radical roots of the Black church, to the radical roots of Black religion in this country.
Yeah. Because
they're not just coming for the mean Negroes. They're not just coming for the outspoken one. They're coming for everybody. So whoever your God is, whatever your doctrine is, I pray and I hope that you have at least a political perspective on it that compels you to some form of showing up.
Yeah. Yeah. Showing up. Woo.
Exactly.
Showing up. And I, and it's, you said a couple things in there that I want to pull out. You said divine right. You mentioned, righteous indignation. Prophetic power and what that looks like and how it's showing up. And, I have to, part of me has to invoke my mama right now, right? Because my mother, we had a conversation the other day, and she read to me from Isaiah, and I was led from that conversation to read in Jeremiah, and it's hard to read the scriptures from the Hebrew Bible and to not see what's happening right now, and not to get indignant, and not to get rageful and righteously indignant and prophetic. And we both went to the same divinity school, and I remember one of the things that I remember that was very helpful for me was a refining of the understanding of prophecy.
That's right.
Before divinity school, I thought prophecy was foretelling, right? Like telling the future or predicting something.
Right.
And then I was corrected into thinking, or to understand that it is forthtelling. It is forthtelling, right? It is telling the truth. It is because when you tell the truth stay the truth, and it looks like foretelling when you're telling the truth. And I guess the question I have for you on that is, what is what saith the Lord, right? And what are spiritual communities and spiritual leaders, called to be saying right now?
Ooh, I love this question, and this is how I know the Spirit is real, because part of the action that I participated in this morning is we marched and then we kneeled for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in recognition of Brother Floyd. And while I was kneeling, I had a very clear word from Spirit that I am with you. I love what you said about the prophets.
Yep.
Because the prophetic books in the Hebrew Testament come to us in a context of estrangement and disinheritance and exile. God's people have been displaced into Babylon.
Yes.
And they've been stratified according to their abilities, the wealth that they are able to generate for Babylon.
Yes.
And their gender. I mean, amongst other, stratifying factors.
Yeah.
And all of the prophets are uttering on God's behalf a variety of different messages. But one of the messages what's consistent in all the messages was that God was completely and wholly aware of the condition of God's people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not only aware from a distance, but aware from among them. And so today, right before I got up and I gave a little speech to the people, I heard Spirit say to me so clearly that the war of my people is also the war of heaven. And I think that that's the message, at least today, right? Because we got to talk to Jesus every day, child. The message today is that, and Brother Dr. James Cone said this before us, that God is on our side.
Yes.
And I get the sort of disillusionment that happens from seeing state-sanctioned murder after state-sanctioned murder on top of the existential conditions of disinheritance that Black people live with. But I think now is that moment where choose you this day. Do you believe? And will you fight in the name of the God that is with you? And in the names of the ancestors who stayed believing, who died believing, but never saw the promise? Do you believe?
Yeah.
You know, and if you believe, let's do this work because God is with us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. And it's interesting, the notion that God is on our side, that God sees us, that God is with us, that Spirit is present.
That's right.
And what popped into my mind is that when I feel out of alignment with my spiritual wellness, when I remember that God is here, I feel like I realign, right? And that is a constant thing. That is a thing that for me personally is a thing that stays the same, right? That helps me get back in alignment with what my purpose is, how I'm walking, how I'm moving, how I'm behaving, who I'm in community with. And that, who I'm in community with, right? Because I have been called to some communities and called to not be in some other communities. And I've gotten clarity on that, right?
Facts.
You know what I'm saying? And and I'm also, part of me also feels called to, we in our first session with Omi, she mentioned protecting our peace, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways that goes for me, right? But I wonder for you, in thinking about being in alignment of knowing that God is with us. I'm curious what you think about what the constant influx of videos and stories of Black death and Black pain and Black trauma do to our spirits. And I'm gonna say, I'm gonna offer this, and I would love to hear what you have to say about this.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I just want to offer that, for me, I'm the type of person who has shielded myself intentionally from those videos, and I've encouraged folks to not share them and to not, because it's like trauma porn, and that takes me out of alignment. But then other folks say, well, we need those videos because that's what shows people that we need to fight against it, right? And my response is like, listen, if I got to show you this video, if I got to show you this video to convince you, then I don't know if it's worth it. I don't know if it's worth it to try to convince you, right?
Right.
But again, the question for you is, what do you feel like that is doing to our spirits, and what orientation towards that do you have an inkling or an insight on?
Yeah, I think this is a layered conversation because Absolutely. I do think that America has a pretty kind of debased relationship with the image of Black death, because we see videos, but there is a photographic history of white terrorism against Black bodies. It's how we know that lynching was real. It's how we know that whipping posts were real. It's how we know that dismemberment was real. And so there's a very the relationship between this country and the anguish and the terrorism against Black bodies it's a fine line between the archiving and record keeping and, like you said, the pornography of anti-Black violence. And so, and this fascination, there's a lot of Thomases in the white community that you have to see it to believe it, right? Even though we know this is real every day. And so I also just think, though, even in our own community, there's a spectrum of mental, spiritual, psycho-spiritual kind of fortitude against that imagery. There are some who needed to see it to be activated to do something about it. Right. Whereas there are those who are like, you know what? All I had to do was hear that man put his white meat in that Black man's neck for 8 minutes. Right. And I'm ready. Where we rising up, And so I think we do also have to say, though, there was something very galvanizing about that videography that I think globally people saw what has been happening here. I mean, maybe too made a very conscientious decision back in the day. No, we're not going to close my son's casket.
Yes.
Because the world needs to see what was done to him.
Yeah.
And so even we recognize that there is a power, not just to the exposition of the atrocities, but to letting everybody see. Because in some sense, it implicates the world, right? That in some sense, this has happened because you allowed it to.
Yeah.
And I think that in part, that's why we've seen this global kind of domino effect, which is amazing to me. I will say, though, we're in a place now where if we're really serious about Black Lives Mattering, we need to recognize the interconnectedness of our lives, not just communally, but individually. We're not just bodies that they disposed of.
Yes.
We have Black minds, we have Black souls, we have Black spirits. And if we say that our lives matter, we need to be a little bit more careful and a little bit more sensitive with how we deal with one another. And so all week long, I've been wanting to make this video and put it on my feed about like how a simple measure such as a trigger warning can give people the opportunity to either opt into watching a video on your feed or continue scrolling.
Right.
But if you don't, I mean, Instagram gives you the power to put multiple images in one post, right? And so what would it take? What would it mean for those of us who decide, you know what, I want to put this video on here because for those who need to see this in order to be activated, whatever. What would it mean for those people to decide, I'm going to make a little trigger warning on my, to put on here just so people can decide if they want to watch this or if they want to keep scrolling. That is a simple measure that we can take that is also extremely pastoral, extremely sensitive, and extremely considerate, that there are those of us who simply cannot look at that anymore.
Right.
I don't want to see that shit. Excuse my language. But that's how I feel.
You good in here.
You
good in here. No, I mean,
because I've seen it, and I don't need to see it. Oh, and Dr. Gregory Ellison at Emory Candler School of Theology said that once you see something, you cannot unsee it, and that's for better and for worse. And so for those of us who did watch the video of what happened to Brother Floyd on that street, we don't need to see it more than twice.
Yeah, right.
Because the way the brain works, it puts it on repeat anyways.
Yeah.
So again,
no, but what you're right, exactly what you're saying is that's why I asked about the orientation towards this type of action, right? Because there is a protection of peace, but there is this prophetic, let them see what they did to my boy, energy. So it's what you said speaks to that, right? Like providing a way for us to approach from both angles or from a multitude of angles is super important.
And I also want to say, like, each of us are our own agents on these platforms and our own agents in terms of what news we take in.
Yes.
I have blocked. I have unfollowed. I know the accounts that will post the atrocious just to get a reaction. I unfollow. I think we all just need to utilize those steps in these digital platforms. And outside of digital platforms, I want to underscore how important the point is of what you made about community.
Yes.
Because one of the most difficult and most unfair conditions of this pandemic was that it forced a lot of people into isolation. And God bless those who actually caught the COVID and had to be sick by themselves. But even those who are just trying to stay home, stay safe by themselves, the sort of way of knowing, like, we're living in a pandemic and how much weight that is. To be isolated during that period was just like a lot. It's just so much. And you talked about how we're having to rethink community. I think that now you have to really pay attention to how people make you feel.
Yes.
Individual people and groups and communities that you've been in, do they make you feel safe, loved, seen, important? Do they give you space to throw your whole authenticity around and give voice to what you're feeling? And does the vibration elevate when you're in the room and when you're around these people? We got to be real sensitive to those kinds of elements right now and moving forward. We owe that to ourselves.
We absolutely owe it to ourselves. And you came on in this conversation with a lot of energy because you were just at an action. And one of the things that I when I think about spirit, when I think about community, when I think about Black folks, one thing that when I think about wellness, one thing that I often don't want to get lost in these conversations, especially during the pandemic, the uprising, rage, anger. I don't want to get lost. What I don't want to get lost is the spirit of joy. Right? And there's a duality here. We need the balance, and joy is not an ignorant joy. It is a resilient joy, right? And
absolutely.
And I'm wondering from you what you see from the spirit of joy and how that moves and how that moves and how that reverberates and how that is powerful.
Whew, child. I mean, when I think about Black joy, I think about this sort of axiom we have in the Black church that the world didn't give us our joy.
Yeah.
The world cannot take it away.
Yeah.
And, there's a tie, to that joy, to our relationship with the spirit realm.
Yeah.
Our relationship with the God who made us and created us, the God who keeps us, to our ancestors who've gone before us and continue to lay their hands of protection upon us.
Yeah.
Who, through practices like what Omi led us through.
Yes.
Through the sort of spiritual disciplines and embodied practices of what we believe and what we're hoping for, right?
Yes.
Our joy is not in, this world. I don't, this is an anti-Black world, And
right.
so, I had a moment of joy this morning when we marched under the bridge on Auburn Avenue, and under the bridge, you have all these names of the Black-owned businesses that lined Auburn Avenue back in the day, where it was the central of Black Atlanta,
Right.
And I had a moment of joy as we marched under that, kind of singing and chanting, and then there was just this moment where a whole bunch of Black folks were lined up in their cars on Auburn Avenue, parked with their masks on, honking, with their signs up, with their fists out the window. And I was like, this is joy.
Yep.
This is joy.
Yeah.
I mean, that was joy. And so I think one of the things that we have to remain mindful of is we need to catch the joy when it emerges. Yes. We have to catch the joy when we see it, where we see it. That's where we, and I got tears in my eyes, just thinking about how God always sends a sign of ashe and yes, and I'm with you and I got you. And in those moments, joy unspeakable. It's joy unspeakable. And my family was there, and just even thinking about during this pandemic, the extra effort that I've gone to with, and other people have gone to make more, to solidify our relationships and our connections to each other, whether it's on Zoom or whether it's on FaceTime or whether it's every week or every other week. Let's make sure that we're okay. Let's check in. That is joy. It's the way that we resist the isolation. It's the way that we get creative in really death-dealing conditions. It's the way that we tap into our legacy and our heritage as people who found a way or made one. That's joy.
Woo! You gotta catch it when it comes, don't you? You gotta go with the flow.
You got to catch it.
Woo, man. Listen, Neichelle.
Tell me.
Oh man, I do wanna give voice to anything else you want to lift, any word that has come upon you that you may not have, I may not have prompted with the question.
I appreciate you for inviting me, and I'm happy to support all the things that you do. I really believe in you. And my last words that I want to share, I shared it this morning, and it's really been on my spirit, that in the story of creation, the last thing that God created was humankind. And when God stepped back and looked over that creation, God said, that is very good. And then God breathed into that creation, and that creation became a living being, which says to me that our breath is God-given. And that anyone who attempts, any system that attempts, any individual who attempts to steal our breath is actually waging war against God and waging war against heaven. And so what I want to say is, Black people, your breath is revolutionary. And your act of breathing is a revolutionary act. So I want to encourage us to just keep breathing. Take time every day just to breathe and to embrace and to revel in your Black breath, because God gave it to you.
Yes.
All right.
All I got to say is yes. All I got to say is yes to that. This is another thing where we've been allowed. I've been thinking that and saying that all week to my wife. So I'm like, Neichelle, again, you right here with it.
We right here. We always been right here with it.
Okay. Thank you again. Thank you.
I appreciate
so
it. And thank you to everyone who tuned in.
Yes, thank you to everybody who tuned in.
Peace and power. True.